Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. I trust you had a great weekend. I'd like to first thank David Williams of CNBC Africa for taking my thoughts this morning on the East African markets and the Nairobi Securities Exchange. And I wrote a piece over the weekend about that, so I'll get to that in a moment. But thank you, David, who challenged me to a tie war he was wearing, as you can see, quite a fancy one. I'd like to thank Dennis McCory for an outstanding mind speak. He started by telling us how he used to stand on matatus to save 25 shillings. Now we've done we'll upload the session in the next couple of days on Rich TV. I'd like to thank the Intercontinental, but most of all Dennis, who was extremely interesting. Started off with the One Hen campaign, which got everybody thinking. Said many things: cultivate your niche, find out what you are good at, and just do it, he said. Describing how he first got on a computer when it was the time of Windows 98. So that will be uploaded probably sometime tomorrow. Home thoughts. I like this tweet from Sasha Narishkeen. It is springtime here in the southern hemisphere. My favourite tree for this time of year in my garden, and I'll put up that photograph. Don Delillo again. Point omega, we're the last billionth of a second in the evolution of matter. And I've recently been reading End Zone, which is an interesting book. And in it, on page 43, it says it's also the placement of bodies. What men say is relevant only to the point at which language moves masses of people or a few momentous objects into significant juxtaposition. After that, it becomes almost mathematical. 1 million pilgrims face Mecca. Think of the power behind that fact. All turning now and bending and praying. History is the angle at which realities meet. I'll put up an image of End Zone. And yesterday we went to Diamond Plaza to have her hair done, and I bought Hannah a coconut. And she enjoyed it so much I took her photograph, and I'll put that up as well. I like this: David Hockney, Pool and Steps, the party that started a revolution. Political reflections. I just took one sentence out of an article in Counterpunch, in which it said the Ukrainian army is getting beaten to a pulp. And then an interesting article in National Interest asking what is Putin's goal. Going forward, there are 3 objectives to be obtained. First, to weaken the bargaining position of the Ukrainian government and to move it towards acceptance of Russian proposals. The second, to destroy or degrade its military and economic capabilities. And the third, perhaps most significant, is to discredit Western promises of aid and support, and if possible, induce a feeling of betrayal and abandonment among Ukraine's leaders. And I wrote about this the previous week when I said, NATO has thrown out a whole new characterization of warfare called ambiguous warfare. Eastern Ukraine has become a shadow zone. Over the weekend, Vladimir Putin said we need to immediately begin substantive talks on questions of the political organization of society and statehood in southeastern Ukraine. And he sparked renewed speculation that he might be seeking to create a statelet in southeast Ukraine after he employed a loaded Tsarist-era name, Novorossiya, to refer to the region. President Obama said of the crises, this is not something that's comparable to the challenges we faced in the Cold War. This is something we can handle, he said. The Saudi king has warned of the terrorism threat to US and Europe. The king made the statement during a reception for foreign ambassadors held in Jeddah. I ask you to convey this message to your leaders. Terrorism at this time is an evil force that must be fought with wisdom and with speed. And if neglected, I'm sure after a month it will arrive in Europe, and a month after that in America. Dr. Davidson tweeted a good illustration of global military spending. Saudi Arabia spent close to 10% of its GDP on the military last year. Then Said Benjamin tweeted a photograph. ISIS infamous hashtag Bakia wa Tata Meded on school walls east of the Saudi capital, Riyadh. And I agree with Paulo Coelho, who tweeted this morning, I refuse to believe that a state-of-the-art, multi-billion-dollar espionage apparatus only discovered the ISIS threat a few weeks ago. Going back to Dr. Davidson, he's written a piece, he's been quoted in Counter Punch. Global Research reports that the UAE attacked Libya have been described as a watershed moment by analysts who said it is the first time the Emiratis have directly attacked another country in its short history. This is incredibly significant, as it is the first hard evidence of the UAE shifting from proxy to engaging in a hot conflict for the first time in its history, said Christopher Davidson. There is now a leadership in place that has abandoned the UAE's historic foreign policy pillars, which under Sheikh Zayed involved being carefully realists about the small, wealthy country's position in the regional system, he added. Ironically, 130 days ago, we visited the Grand Mosque in Abu Dhabi. I'll put up a photograph of the absolutely super chandelier, and you can see the inside. But an Apache helicopter flew over the Grand Mosque as we entered it. And I took a photograph of it, and I hope you can see it. Premier Tusk mixes charm with pragmatism as first Easterner to lead the EU. Tusk is a master at seducing allies over red wine, cigars, and discussions of his favourites from ancient Greece and Rome, according to Piskorski's 2014 memoir, Between Us Liberals. Poland's frontline status in the Ukraine crisis this year helped propel Tusk into the limelight. A soccer enthusiast who has taken to running, Tusk told Spiegel magazine in an April 2011 interview that he prefers pragmatism to great visionary designs, as that is how most normal people think. I put up a photograph I took of him when he made a presentation at the EEC European Economic Congress that I attended. Howard French is calling Newsweek's piece, which was talking about the risk of bushmeat infection, Ebola infection via bushmeat into the US. He described that piece as the worst tradition of ooga booga journalism. He was a great interviewee, and I'll put up that link as well. International markets, the US still decides the future of capitalism, not the G20 and not the BRICS nations. That link is on Rich Wrap-Ups if you go to have a look, and I agree with that. Currency markets, Euro 131.25 fell as low as 131.19, which is a level not seen since September 2013. Dollar index 82.79, Japanese yen 104.18, Swiss franc 0.9192, the pound 165.97, Aussie 0.9341, India rupee 60.51, South Korean won 1013.95, Rial 223.45, Egyptian pound has softened actually, 718.46. I've been having it around the 715 area for eternity. South African rand 1065.42. Today is a US Labor Day holiday, and that's probably going to dampen market activity. I'll put up a one-year chart of the dollar index, and I'm very bullish about that. And as I wrote on the 25th of August, you see in the old days, these conditions, geopolitical uncertainty and all kinds of things, would have created a flight into the dollar. And interestingly, the dollar has been punching higher, I wrote. If things tip big, the dollar might soar. Euro dollar 131.225 started on a weak note, second straight month of losses. In August, slipped 1.9%, fell 2.2% in July. I think it's going lower. I like this photograph of an updated take on sashimi, featuring seared fatty tuna, uni, caviar, and Asian pear. Wall Street Journal magazine, rather tasty looking. Gold, I'm going to put up a 1-year chart of that. We're now at 1286.855. I think we're going to struggle to get above 1300, and we're heading towards 1240. Crude oil, very oversold at the last week when we were around $93 levels. We're now at 95.79. I'll put up a 1-year chart for you to have a look at. Saudi Arabia's tadawul all-share index climbed 0.6% to close at 11,112, bringing its increase in August to 8.8%, which is its biggest monthly jump since February 2012. And that's all around the news that they're opening their $531 billion stock market to foreigners. That was the value of it on the 6th of August. Arab States Capital Markets Authority said the market will open to eligible foreign financial institutions to invest in listed shares during the first half of 2015 with God's permission. IOL South Africa is reporting that President Robert Mugabe, who's 90 and Africa's oldest leader, was showered with praise but not with banknotes on his 13th trip to China in search of financial rescue. In that report, there's some interesting detail where evidently the Chinese are looking for some kind of securitization for any further loans they might make. And these comments came from Chinamasa. Our securitization, which we have already agreed, is not to mortgage our minerals, but to set aside a portion of cash flows that arise when we are exploiting our mineral resources, whether diamonds and gold. A well-connected analyst in Harare, who did not want to be named as he had not yet been able to assess the China deal signed by Mugabe, said, "So far, everything about these deals in China is secret, but we know that Zimbabwe is going to pay huge rates for what we believe are infrastructure development loans, such as completing a dam which has been under construction for years, and an ongoing power project which now seems will cost double the original figure. These deals are insured by Sinosure, which has assessed Zimbabwe as E-, in other words, a write-off. As soon as possible, we need to see if we can get an audit on these deals." And then an article in The Independent saying the other Mugabe who's lining up for the Zimbabwean presidency, this is Mrs. Mugabe, "I might have a small fist, but when it comes to fighting, I will put stones inside to enlarge it, or even put on gloves to make it bigger. Do not doubt my capabilities," she said. The Lesotho Prime Minister has accused the army of staging a coup, and he has fled to South Africa, and his deputy seems to be positioning him to take over. I like this from Yahoo. "The terrain is mountainous and the climate continental, with cold, dry winters and hot summers. It styles itself as the kingdom in the sky." On the United Nations Human Development Index, however, Lesotho ranked 162nd out of 187 countries rated in 2013. I'll put up a photograph of the Lesotho Maseru bus station. Islamists have attacked an intelligence site in Somalia, leaving 11 dead. After the initial blast, gunmen stormed the compound but did not reach the underground cells, where suspected militants were being detained, Yusuf said. One intelligence officer, who identified himself only as Noor, told Reuters that gunmen had entered one building, forcing security personnel to fight room to room to clear them out. "All the attackers perished in the end," Noor said. "It seems their target was to cause a mess here and thus free their militant colleagues held in the underground cells. But that will not happen," Noor said. Sheikh Abdiaziz Abu Musab, al-Shabaab spokesman for military operations, told Reuters the group was behind the attack, the latest in a series of raids in Mogadishu in recent months, including a July assault on a presidential compound. "For a long time, innocent Muslims have suffered in the dungeons of that prison, subjected to torture and humiliation," he said in a statement, adding that the raid was in retaliation and as just punishment for the apostate criminals. And apparently AMISOM and others have been making some headway. But, Al-Shabaab is asymmetrical. This is a typical example of that. The South African all-share ticked 0.34% higher. On Friday, it's up 10.167% this year, below 51,000. Dollar rand, 1065.24, still in that 1030.11 range we've been for a while. The Egyptian pound has softened a little bit, 718.54. The Egyptian stock market up 39.2804% is at multi-year highs. Kellogg, the world's top breakfast cereal maker, is interested in acquiring at least a 51% stake in Bisco Misr, the Egyptian snack maker. It's one of the country's main bakers, producing more than 90 types of biscuits and cakes. The Nigerian all-share firmed up 0.42%. That's up 0.4911% this year. Ghana Stock Exchange, whilst at January lows, ticked 0.1% higher. It's positive 2.5641% this year. WHO, the World Health Organization, tweeted a map of Ebola transmission in West Africa. I'll put that up. Another article is saying people are scared and worried and everyone wants to go home. Some people are staying, but many Chinese have gone. I participated in that interview, Inside Story, about Ebola with Laura Kyle. I'll put that link up again. I previously said viruses exhibit non-linear and exponential characteristics. I said many things, but one I sort of took the WHO number of 20,000 infections and said to Laura that this could be 200,000, and my maths would be just as valid because of a number of reasons. Some of them I touched on in that piece I wrote on the 18th of August 2014. WHO said on its website that staff at the Ebola outbreak sites see evidence that the numbers of reported cases and deaths vastly underestimate the magnitude of the outbreak. So I think it's an undercount. I said this is surely a given. World Bank has written treatises on data gathering in sub-Saharan Africa, and therefore I err on the side of a massive undercount in the matter of Ebola. According to the Nobel Prize-winning biologist Joshua Lederberg, the single biggest threat to man's continued dominance on this planet is the virus. And I said viruses exhibit non-linear and exponential characteristics, and the new cheek-by-jowl living arrangements in so many of our cities surely present the Ebola virus with optimal conditions. The World Health Organization said that Ebola rose last week at the fastest pace since the epidemic began in West Africa in March. Coming to Kenya, my weekly piece was titled Greatest Bull Markets Climb the Wall of Worry. The Nairobi All-Share opens today, having closed at a record high every single session last week, which is a record-breaking winning streak. The Nairobi All-Shares rallied 15.5799% so far in 2014, and this year's acceleration is part of a bull market that began in 2012. The All-Share has posted a 110.83% return over the last 36 months. It has rallied 28.55% since the Westgate attack last year. The NSE 20 soared 50.23 points on Friday to close at a more than 5-year high of 5139.39. Edwin Lefebvre, who wrote Reminiscences of a Stock Operator, a 1923 roman à clef, which is the thinly disguised biography of Jesse Lauriston Livermore, said, "The tape is your telescope. You can depend upon it 7 out of 10 cases." The point he was making was that you cannot fight the tape, and the point I am making is that the tape has been emitting a very compelling and incontestable signal. The rally has good breadth, and in my opinion the market is headed a lot higher. In the book Reminiscences, there is a fellow called Partridge who responds to every question, "Well, this is a bull market, you know." This is the point. The recent shilling wobble has been uppermost in the market's mind, and the shilling touched a 31-month low of 88.90 last week before the central bank intervened and sold between $30 and $50 million to stem the slide and bounce the shilling as far as 88.35, which is where the currency ended last week. Juguna Dungu described the shilling's weakness as a paradox to the Financial Times' Katrina Manson. It was not too long ago that I was referring to the Teflon shilling. The shilling remains the second best performing currency in Africa against the US dollar. The dollar has embarked on a meaningful and broad-based rally as investors anticipate a rate hike in the US ahead of all other developed economies. The shilling's recent wobble might have been in part informed by the generally stronger dollar. Overlay the fact that tea prices have not been strong this year and pressure has built because there's been a cratering of hard currency tourism receipts. Those were my comments to the FT, and we can understand the recent wobble. I, for one, am not prepared to buy the 90+ shilling per dollar and even 95 forecast. The shilling has confounded expectations and will confound them again. The most important inverse correlation for the shilling is with the price of crude oil. Crude oil has retreated more than 10% over the last 4 weeks, and this price retreat will give relief to the shilling. History says the greatest bull markets climb the wall of worry, while our all-share index has rallied 28.55% since Westgate, 342 days ago, and I'll put a photograph of it the day it caught fire. National Bank reported first half profit after tax accelerated 16.679%. Interesting surge in loans and advances to customers, up 98.818% to 54.7171 billion. First half profit before tax rose 32.099%. First half profit after tax rose 16.679%. A very big expansion of 98.818% in loans and advances to customers, and a rights issue is now a given. Tanzania has edged past Uganda as Kenya's largest export market, and I expect it to stay there. Safaricom Airtel signed a 10.5 billion shilling deal to acquire U Mobile assets. A deal is expected to be concluded in the last quarter of this year. Safaricom will take over U Mobile's network, IT and office infrastructure, while Airtel will acquire the company's subscribers. I'll put up a link for Safaricom's share price and full year results. It's within 1.52% of an all-time closing high reached in April this year, and I think it's going to push on through that momentarily. Kenol Kobil, interesting article in Bloomberg, says it's focusing on the existing business, it pays debts, rather than buying companies. They have operations in 9 countries. We're currently concentrating on building our business in Burundi and Rwanda, where returns on investment have been disproportionately high. We are growing without making too much noise, quietly increasing our network in countries where returns are clear. We have no plans to acquire companies. They've opened 20 service stations in Burundi over the past year, taking the total there to 34, while in Rwanda it now has 56 facilities, compared with 38 in 2013, he said. Returned to profit last year by slashing costs, reducing turnover, reducing its workforce by 41%. We are heading there, he said. It's a process to get debt-free. We have done a lot in this regard, and more will happen in the second half. Kenol Kobil in 2013 ceded its position as Kenya's second biggest retailer of petroleum products by sales to Vivo Energy Total. Kenya is the largest. We want to be a market leader in profitability, not in volume sold. I'll put up a link for their share price and their first half earnings, which were remarkably strong. Profit after tax up 260.44%. Nearly 6 or 7% of the shares traded immediately after the results release. Kenya shilling at 88.473. Nairobi All Shares, I said, closed a record every session last week. It's up 15.5799%. NSE 20 surged 50 points to close at a more than 5-year high of 5,139. We've had a very strong performance in the stock market. Kenya Orchards, by the way, has rallied a total of 406.666%, which is extraordinary. Safaricom rallied 4.061% last month, within 1.52% of an all-time high. Nation Media results a little bit flat, I thought, and a little bit disappointing. KCB closed at 57.50. It's plus 21.693% this year, and just 1.709% below a record high set in August. Centum has been a very strong share. That's up 63.63% through this morning. Total rallied 8.89% on Friday after releasing what were very good earnings. And finally, I'll just mention UNGA is up 94.444% in 2014. The big caps have been strong, posted good returns, but we've had a very strong small cap outperformance this year so far. Kenya Orchards is obviously the outlier, but there are plenty more. Once again, thank you for stopping by. I do appreciate it.